and Zoom is going live to YouTube. So
wow.
I've never done it on my iPad, so I really don't know what it looks like. Oh, looks like I can see it. Cathy Segal-Garcia's personal meeting room. It looks like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, there we are. And comments as well. Cool. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
So everything's fine.
Fine for me.
Okay, I'm just turning the volume down on YouTube. Good. Okay, it actually works and I can see it and everything. Great. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, this is Brian McNelis, and I have to apologize. There's a little bit of technical difficulty. My computer is down and I'm only using my iPad, and my iPad won't stream to Facebook, so I'm on YouTube today. But that's okay, we're here. So, and I'm really looking forward to talking with Brian because one main reason is because he's a friend of Catherine Bostic's. And Catherine is a really dear friend of mine. And she said a lot of really great things about you. And she kept telling me, she is awesome. She also, just so you know, kept telling me to ask you about your basically like life philosophy a lot, because she said that was a really groovy thing of yours. And for me, that's also something that I really enjoy talking about. So we'll definitely get into that. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Whatever you want. I mean,
cool. So, you are a music executive. I think you're maybe one of the first music executives I've spoken to.
Uh-oh. Yeah, you're foxes and hen houses or something like that, right? Letting in people from the other side.
Exactly. So, when you, I guess when you say that, you tell us a little bit more. I know you own a record label, right?
Well, I run it. I don't own it.
Okay.
So I've been running record labels for, I don't know. I've been in the music business probably, professionally 35 years, and my career led me to, I started in distribution at Warner and WEA in the 80s, and then that led to an independent record label that was distributed by Warner Brothers, and then that led to another independent record label, and then that led to another independent label. And so for the better part of my career, I was only at WEA and Warner Brothers about 2.5 years. It seemed like a long, but many years later, I realized it was just a very short but very profound stint in my professional history. So what I've mostly done is some version of sales and marketing early on, kind of overseeing the sales and marketing side of independent record labels. And then later on became a general manager. And now basically, I run Lakeshore Records, and I was basically running the day-to-day of Cleopatra before that, but really focused on the sales and marketing aspect of it and working with the owner of the label. Lakeshore has been a great opportunity because it was a film production company. So my entry into film music in earnest was going to work for Lakeshore Entertainment, which won 4 Academy Awards for $1 Million Baby. Made 35 feature films over the course of 25 years. The Lincoln Lawyer with Matthew McConaughey. Age of Adeline with Blake Lively. One of the last films we made was Peppermint with Jennifer Gardner. you know, we did the Underworld franchise, which was Kate Beckinsale. It was Vampires and Werewolves. There were 5 films in that franchise that Lakeshore made. And so, you know, I've been a music guy. I've been a music guy that became a music and film guy. And now I'm back to being I'm still a music and film guy because the record label that I run is a film music label. So we put out, our primary business is scores and soundtrack albums, you know, film scores and soundtrack albums. That's how I met Catherine. She's a composer, and her agent called me up and said, you know, Catherine is a client of mine and she's got this really awesome project. She scored this documentary about Toni Morrison. She's just a really cool musician. And, you know, we should look at releasing the record. And I did. And I met Catherine. Amazing. I mean, just really a truly amazing human being. And we kind of clicked. And she said, hey, you know, I know there's no budget for this, but like, what do you think if we do a music video of me just sitting down at a piano playing, you know, the song that I did, you know, that's got vocals on it? And I said, yeah, you know, sure, we can do that cheap. You know, we can, you know, just get a room and a piano. And I have a couple shooters that I use and, you know, that bring their own lighting and really professional, but, you know, very cost effective. Sure, let's do it. And so I met Catherine on the set of shooting a music video for her. And, you know, I think that we've become kind of fast friends. And I kind of like that, you know, that's kind of how it goes with a lot of my relationships with a lot of the people we put out records for. I should say, unlike a traditional record label where you sign artists and you have contracts where you have artists under contracts for multiple commitments of multiple albums, what we do is one off at a time. You know, like if somebody doesn't like me, they never have to work with me again. So, you know, we have a very different business model. You know, the trade-off in our business model is that we benefit from all the marketing that the studios do. You know, mostly the projects that we do are things that you've heard of, and you've heard of them because they have many millions of dollars in marketing behind them. But, you know, the trade-off is that we don't have any long-term contracts. Everything that we do one record at a time. Just, that's it, one record at a time. And so, you know, relationships are the business. And it's always fun to have, you know, these kind of relationships, the kind I have with Catherine as well as, you know, other composers.
Huh. Was this, was the song State of Grace or the other song?
It was High Above the Water.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
From the Toni Morrison doc. Yeah.
Right.
So that was a lot of fun. You can see the video on YouTube.
Yeah.
You know, we had a lot of fun making it. It was really fast. It was hot. Catherine had found this. She had a friend who had like an art space that had a piano in it, this big open room. She said, you know, can you meet me here? And I said, sure. And I had the cameraman guy show up with his lighting. He's self-contained. And I think that we did the whole thing in like maybe 4 hours. Like we wow. Showed up, we shot it, and we left. I think everything was done in 4 hours.
Wow.
Maybe 3. I don't know. We only had the room for a short period of time. So it was like, okay, let's get this, let's get that, let's get this master, let's get this wide, let's get medium. Let's just get a bunch of coverage and hope it all comes together. And then I'm very lucky that, you know, over the years you find people that, you know, believe in the cause. And I have an editor friend who's edited a ton of music videos for me over the years, big and small, and, you know, still does me favors. And I called him up and I said, hey, I've got this project. It's for this Toni Morrison thing. We shot this video in a couple hours. You know, could you edit it together? And he you know, super skilled editor, and he brought in some additional like effects and stuff to like gloss it over and you know, kind of make it not look as low budget as it was. And you know, Catherine had a really good run on that record. She got a lot of awards, nominations, I think that she was shortlisted for best song for the Academy Awards. She didn't get the nomination, but she was on the short list, which is an incredible honor, right? That's phenomenal that she was shortlisted for best song for Academy Award. That's official. That's from the Academy, right? And I think the SEL, the Society of Composers and Lyricists, as well.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was just really happy to be a part of that process to, you know, help shine a light on her great work.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, it's sounds very interesting. I'm sure by the end of this interview that I'll have a little bit more of a handle on what it is you do, because it sounds very independent, this part of it, but yet you also have worked for big companies and still do too. It is the work that you do for big companies, does it bring in this kind of independent action, or is it under, I don't know how to put it, but under the umbrella of big business in actions more?
Um, you know, we're an independent company. You know, when I started at Lakeshore, there were a handful of independent record labels that were specializing in film music,
Yeah.
and you know, so we're an independent company. We're really kind of the last one left that does what we do. All the other labels that were doing independent film music have either been acquired by larger companies or have restructured away from doing new releases and frontline product. So even as far back as, you know, there were, you know, labels in the 80s like Varice Saraband, who were releasing, you know, big film scores back in the 80s. I think that they go back to the 70s, maybe they go back to the 80s. So, you know, there's always been this weird intersection where film music, for whatever reason, wasn't always the domain of major labels. Even though the films were coming out on major studios, the records would come out on independent labels, and it creates a really unique opportunity. I think that there, you know, at any point in time that you look at the recorded history of film music, you know, there's you know, like a big business out there. You know, Greatest Showman is on Atlantic Records, right? And Star is Born is on Interscope, which is Universal. And you know, certainly Disney is a powerhouse, you know, through and through with everything they do. But there's a lot of titles, you know, even for what might be considered bigger films or bigger projects, that for whatever reason, you know, don't do the kind of volume or don't have the kind of audience as a record that, you know, is attractive to a major label. So, you know, we've gotten really, like, look, I think that part of it is that we've gotten lucky, and I think part of it is that we work hard. But, you know, we did, like, you know, we do films. We did Drive, which was an independent film. So a bunch of stuff that we do, like Drive was a really big record. And the film did, you know, pretty good as an independent film. But as a record, it was much bigger than anybody thought that the film or the record would be. We do a lot of mainstream stuff, you know. We did Logan, which was a Marvel film for 20th Century Fox. It's a Marco Beltrami score. You know, probably some of the biggest stuff that we've done in the last few years would be Stranger Things, which is certainly a household name and the biggest franchise brand at Netflix. You know, we're doing a bunch of stuff for the streamers. We're doing a bunch of stuff for the networks. We're doing Star Trek and, you know, Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard for CBS. We did The Walking Dead for AMC.
Wow.
We did The Handmaid's Tale for Hulu and MGM.
Crazy,
you
man.
know, I mean, so, you know, these are titles that, you know, people know. You know, if we did Moonlight, it won the Academy Award for Best Picture, and Nick Britell's score was nominated for Best Score. We also released If Beale Street Could Talk. Nick's score for Beale Street was also nominated for an Academy Award. So that's 2 consecutive films in a row that Nick Britell was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Score. Last year we did Marriage Story, which had a score by Randy Newman. It was nominated for both Best Picture and Best Score. Last year for the Academy Awards, that was Marriage Story. So, you know, these are, you know, we, you know, in a way we get the keys to the Ferrari. It's really, it's a lot of fun. And it's not all the big stuff, you know. It's you know, the big stuff is nice and it's fun. It's good to pay the bills, but, you know, we support a lot of independent filmmakers. We support a lot of smaller projects that are very important to the people making them. And we really believe that, you know, that any creative person, any creative endeavor, right? Like nobody gets up and says, "Oh, I'm going to make this art, but I don't, but I hope nobody sees it and nobody cares," right? Like people make art because they care, whether it's an independent film or a smaller TV show or whatever it is. People care. My background is, as a musician, not a great musician. It's why I became an executive, right? If I was a better musician, maybe I wouldn't have become an executive. But my friends are artists and musicians and filmmakers, and we like to celebrate that art that they make.
Yeah. What did you play, or what do you play?
Well, I'd like to say, in the beginning, I played keyboards badly. I became like one of those first generation. I came up in the 80s, so I was like one of the first generation of people that were using MIDI and programming. They say, "What instrument do you play?" And I'd say a computer, because with the computer it can play better than I can. You got to program everything in, but you're not as limited. Like a composer can write music that's more complex than they can play, right? That doesn't, just because you can't play what you can write doesn't diminish the creative process of the ability to express yourself, right? So I was primarily a keyboard player, and I ended up being the guy in the band that played keyboards, not because I was a talented keyboard player, but because I was the guy who had keyboards.
Yeah.
And there just weren't a lot of us around, synth guys in the 80s. There weren't a lot of us. And so if you wanted a synth guy in the 80s, you had to get one of the guys who it's like the drummers thing, right? Like if you want a drummer, you got to find somebody who has a drum kit and a place to practice, right? So I was the guy in the band that liked hanging out with everybody, and the bass player would show me the chord progressions, and the bass player taught me theory. And off we went. He says, just do this. Don't touch those keys, and just do this. And, here's the progression. I'm like, oh, this isn't, I was listening to Tangerine Dream and, experimental electronic records, so, when I joined a band, I was like, oh, there's actually rules to this. And so that was fun. That was, you're young, you want to be in a band, you want to hang out. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. What is a typical day at work for you? Or is there a typical day?
I don't know that there both is and isn't. It's both extremely predictable and extremely unpredictable at the same time. It's a mix of primary responsibilities. One is to go out and drum up business. Like I'm in the begging business. People say, "What do you do?" And I say, "I beg for a living." That's what I do, because we work from record to record, project to project, and so a big part of the job is maintaining relationships and staying in touch with agents and composers and film music executives at the different studios and networks, and seeing how we can be of service to them with the projects that they've got coming up, whether it's being of service to a composer or it's being of service to the filmmakers who want to get a record out, and maintaining those relationships and having those conversations. And then from there, after we get a record, and everybody agrees that we're going to make a record, then we actually have to make it. And so then it's overseeing production, and we have a staff, the production staff, who are really amazing people. They, all the stuff that like you never think about when you listen to music. Somebody had to make all that happen. Somebody had to assemble all the masters. It all had to be mixed. It all had to be sequenced. It all had to be mastered. Somebody had to make sure all the spelling was right. Somebody has to upload it to the DSPs. You've got to conform to all these rules. It has to have artwork made. The artwork has got all of these contractual obligations. You just can't monkey something up and put it out. There's all of these very, very rigid and very real rules about how things get done and how they have to get done. And we have a staff that does that, makes record. This morning, right before our call, I just jumped off of our production call to have this conversation with you, which is great. But we make records, and then after you make the record, right? So now you've made the record, you have to distribute it. we get it out into the world, and then once it's being distributed, you have to promote it. You have marketing and promotions. You have to, market it. You have to do press. You have to make sure you're supporting the people who did it. So it's really three parts. It's it's getting the deals done. It's finding out who wants and needs to put out records. Once you get those deals done, you go into production, you actually make the record. And then once you make the record, you have to support and promote it. And then, of course, this time of year, well, traditionally, it's a little bit different now with COVID, but, traditionally this time of year would be award season. And by now we'd have a fairly good look at what we think the awards contenders are for the year. But this year is a very different year, and it's all going to slide into January. But so it's some version of those three things all day long. It's some version of those three things. It's talking to people to figure out what they need, then it's production, and then it's promotion.
Yeah. That's a lot, and I can relate to that because I've done a little bit of that all my life, varying moments of it, for myself and for others too, but yours is like yours is these pieces, and they seem very focused, and they have to be focused, otherwise you wouldn't be successful, I'm sure. But so I can relate to that. It's a lot. It's really a lot. If you were going to say a few things that were in general, overall important to keep in mind for your job, for creating a successful project, do you have a few things that I'm sure more than a few, but do you have like some overall things that you always kind of shoot for and make certain of, and you think are really important in the overall picture of everything?
Well, I think that for me, the number one thing is always relationships. It's just always relationships. The relationships are the business. Yeah. And whatever else is going on is a sideshow, right? The two things that we really focus on is, it's always the relationship that matters the most, and we want to be of service to the people that we're in business with. And then the second thing is, like, we're in business with those people that we have relationships with because we care about the art that they make. We care about the music that they're doing. We're caring about the film or the TV show or the video game or whatever. And so, it's always really gratifying. It's a lot of fun to get to work with people that you like on projects that you love. And, that's really the best part of the job. Once you get away from those two things, once you get away from the relationships and, being of service and, having a genuine enthusiasm for the records that you're putting out, all the rest is mechanics. All the rest is, we start here and we end there, and somehow we got to get from point A to point B. All the rest is process, right? But everything that really matters is about relationships and being of service to our partners, and the enthusiasm that comes along with going like, oh my God, like, we get to put out the record for Stranger Things. Like, that is amazing. We get to put out the record for Star Trek or The Walking Dead or Hellraiser going back with Chris Young, or some of the current projects that we have now. We've been working in video games, and you're doing Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and there's an entirely new generation of people, of kids that are captive audience playing these video games, being exposed to really, really robust orchestral scores, like maybe in the same way that I really probably didn't think about film music in any real way until I saw Star Wars. And then I went to a revival of 2001: A Space Odyssey. And then suddenly you go like, oh, that's really something, and then you have like Blade Runner and you hear those Vangelis synthesizers and you go, oh my God, my mind is blown. And, like all of that kind of stuff. So, now that there's this new generation of kids and fans that are experiencing, really robust classical music and orchestrations from video games is really is really pretty exciting. And, you know, sometimes we get to work on soundtracks too. That was our business for a long time, various artist compilation records. And those were a lot of fun. You know, we were making Spotify playlists before there was a Spotify. We were making, you know, mixtapes before there were mixtapes, you know, that was, that's a lot of fun, fun part of it too.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds really intriguing. So, okay, so let's find out a little bit about your background too. You said you grew up on the East Coast. You told me that before. And
I think you're cutting out. I don't know if you've.
I'm still here, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. So you were telling me before that you're from the East Coast. And did you come up interested in music? Did you, when you went to, let's see, did you go to college? Did you go to music school? What happened? How did your life stream go?
Well, you know, I come from fairly humble beginnings. You know, my family was, you know, solidly blue collar, and it was fine. You know, it just was. You know, like everybody worked really hard. You know, people weren't really people in my family weren't, for the most part, really overly interested in the arts. They were interested in living their lives and raising families, and you know, like to go to the movies, watch TV, listen to the hits on AM radio, but there wasn't you know, the bug of music wasn't really in my family necessarily. My mother wanted me to play piano and I wanted to play drums, and we were at a standoff, so I did neither. And you know, the irony is that when synthesizers came out, I really wish that I had taken my mother's, you know, heeded my mother's advice and learned how to play piano. It would have been a lot better than me just getting a synthesizer and trying to figure it out from the beginning. But I really wanted to play drums, and she really wanted to play piano, and there it sat during my elementary school years. So there definitely was an acknowledgement that, you know, music was important in our household, but it was really, I think, you know, I think it really happens around high school. I think it really happens at, you know, middle school, high school. You know, you start to try and find your own identity. And I got tuned into college radio on the East Coast, and it blew my mind. You know, the stuff that wasn't on the mainstream. I don't know, I was probably, you know, kid at night, you know, going across the radio dial looking for, you know, my favorite hit song of the day to record onto a cassette or something, you know, and, you know, hit something that sounded really interesting and I didn't know what it was, and it was on a college radio station. I just stayed there for a little while, and then suddenly I got sucked into this alternate universe of, wow, you can do that? You know, people are doing that? Like, what is that? And it was everything from, like, you know, experimental electronic music. You know, there was a Sunday night radio show at 7:00 on Sunday nights, which was this like synthesizer, you know, experimental electronic radio show. I'm talking like 1979, 1980. And it's like Klaus Schultz and Tangerine Dream and, you know, that kind of stuff. And I was like, wow, this is really crazy stuff. This is amazing. And, you know, and somewhere along the line, it bit me. And that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to get closer to the music. So, you know, I got a synthesizer probably my senior year, and it was a duophonic synthesizer. It was an ARP Odyssey. And I tried to join a band with it. And I knew so little at the time that, like, I could do bass lines on it, stuff like that, and leads, but you couldn't, you know, play chords. And that really wasn't happening. You know, you had to be able to play like, you know, Prince riffs and stuff like that. You know, you really needed a true polyphonic synthesizer, which I got a little bit later on. But, you know, I think that you just follow that path. You know, like, I think that music is one of those things for the most part. I mean, I always, am so interested by musical families where, you know, music is in the family, and then the kids learn music because the parents were musicians, and how all of that works. I didn't really have that experience. I didn't really have it in my neighborhood. Nobody really, wasn't like you went over to anybody's house and their mom and dad were playing music, or they were playing music or whatever. And so, you know, once I got into really, you know, I think that music chooses you. Like, the way that I would tell it to people is that I think that people that pursue music as a professional career in any capacity, whether it's as a musician or an arranger or a roadie or a live booking, you know, a booking agent or a club promoter, whatever it is that you end up doing, if you end up doing it in the music business professionally, I think that music chooses you. I don't think that you choose it. It's too hard. If you could choose something else, you probably would, you know, and that's not to say that, you know, people don't get really successful and make a lot of money, but, you know, like any other curve, there's a lot more people in music that are not incredibly successful and keep doing it year in, year out, right? So there has to be a hook that makes all these people do all this without making a ton of money doing it. And so that's why I always say that I believe that music chooses you more than you choose it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so, and then, well, I guess, how did you, I don't think you already told me this, but how did you make the transition over to doing basically what you're doing now?
Well, yeah. So again, everything follows, I think, the same progression for most people, right? So like if you start playing an instrument, right? Like if you love music, right? And you become obsessed with music, you start buying a lot of records, and then, you know, you're like, how do I get, you always want to get closer to the music, right? And so, you know, you keep wanting to get closer to music. Where does music come from? Well, you know, it comes from a record label. Where does the record label get music? It gets it from the band, right? You know, you go to a record store because you hang out because that's where the music is at. And I think that by the time that you get into a band, you know, it's really kind of the turning point. You get into a band or you start working with other people. And that's the point where you go like, okay, so can I make a living doing this? How do I make a living doing this? Because like, this is really fun and I want to keep doing this. I want to make a living doing this. And I think you pursue that as far as you can and as long as you can. And at some point you hit an intersection where you have to make a choice, where either you get incredibly lucky and you don't have to make a choice because you're making a lot of money making music, which I don't think is the case for most people, or you hit a crossroads where you've got bills to pay and you want to be in a band, and you got bills to pay and, you know, you want to do creative stuff. And I think at some point you hit this crossroads of like, am I going to be a musician with a day job, or am I going to be a career person with music as a hobby? And I think that ultimately everybody who gets involved in music at some point has to make that choice. And that path can go however it goes, whatever choice you make. If you choose to be a musician with a day job, who knows what heights your career could bring, and who knows how hard it could be if it doesn't pan out. And if you choose to be a career person who makes music as a hobby, who knows how that works out, how much money you make, if you have time to make music, and if you still enjoy it, and if music as a hobby is really gratifying for you as you get older, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, the turning point was being in a band and loading out of a club at 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning, and having to work that morning after loading out from the club at 2 a.m. in the freezing rain in Philadelphia, this little bar in Philadelphia.
Oh gosh.
You know, like pumping gear, you know, going to the backstage entrance, you know, loading the gear out into the car in the freezing rain after doing a gig, tired, you know, driving home, knowing that when I get home, I've got to get the gear out of the car, right? And then, you know, like reflecting on that on the drive home and looking at the guys you're in the band with and going like, are we good enough? Like, is this band going to make it? Like, are the songs good enough? Are the performances good enough? And then you realize that your drummer is going to be going off to a different college in 4 months or 5 months. And, the guitar player and principal songwriter has got a completely new trip that he's on and wants to abandon your current material that you've been building the band around. And then the bass player just got engaged, and you just know it's a question of time that now that the bass player is engaged, you're going to have to look. So now you're looking for a new bass player and a new drummer, and the current principal songwriter wants to change directions, and you're driving home, at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, in the rain, soaking wet from loading out, and you're like, is this what I'm going to do? Is this what I'm going to trade one set of these situations for another? Is there enough in it for me to do that? And I think, I hit this moment where I was, I like having my bills paid. I like being warm and dry. I like going to bed at a reasonable hour. I like, and of course, the irony is, years later, as I became an executive in the music business, found myself, I was not going to bed earlier. It was one of the things that did not happen, which cut both ways. But I think that everybody reaches that point where they make a decision, like, am I going to focus on music as like being the thing, and then do other things to try and pay the bills and just move that? I'll rent a room, I'll sofa surf, I'll do like whatever, like I'll figure it out. Or am I going to go for a straight job or a day job of some kind? And I think that, working in the industry is kind of like in the middle, right? Like I didn't end up an insurance salesman, and I didn't end up, at a car dealership, but I also, am not a professional musician. So I think that working in the industry is kind of like this halfway house where you get to be close to the music, you get to work with people you love, and you respect, and you love what they do. And if you can, and I think the real trick to it is that you got to be passionate about it, right? If you're not passionate about being in the executive side of the business, that doesn't last long either. There's always a joke about all executives are frustrated musicians. And I think that that's somewhat true, but I hope it's not a bad frustration, like, yes, I think that everybody who works in the executive side of the business would hope to be a rock star. I think there's a lot of Academy Award winning actors that would like to be rock stars. I think of all the things that people could be, rock star is probably the top of the list for everybody, regardless of what you do for a living, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know that just because we work in the business that we're frustrated rock stars. I think literally everybody is a frustrated rock star. In whatever version of that you find appealing for yourself as a singer-songwriter, as a DJ, as a musician, as a singer, like whatever. I think everybody at some point is a frustrated rock star. So, this is a pretty good compromise. It's pretty nice to hang out with artistic, creative people, be involved in the process, and most importantly, help where you can.
Yeah. Yeah. So, when you decided, it sounds like you had this kind of aha moment, and then was the opportunity presented to you, or did you go looking for it?
It was a little bit of both. By the time the band was still going, as I was working. Well, first I was working in a record store, then I worked at a trade paper, and then I ended up working for WEA, Warner Electro Atlantic, and through all of that, through the record store, working at the trade paper as an intern, and then starting at Warner Electro Atlantic, through all three of those, the band was still going. Oh. And that turning point kind of happened while the band was going and I was working for WEA, and really kind of seeing how the business really worked from the inside out. And, looking around at the band and, looking around at the bigger business, I was very fortunate that, in those days, the major labels had a branch system. And so, in southern New Jersey, outside of Philadelphia, was the Philadelphia branch of WEA, and their market was Philadelphia, Baltimore, and DC. And, that kind of infrastructure I don't think exists anymore. And who knows what my life would have been like if that infrastructure didn't exist for me, but it did. And, so I got to see how the record business worked at a very high level. at a very young age while I was in a band. And, I was like, yeah, this is, like I do gigs with my band, and then I leave the gig with my band to literally go hang out with rock stars, go see, bands play the local arena. And then after the arena gig was over, because it ended earlier, then go to a club and hang out with a band that was coming up through the clubs that was also signed to the label. And, suddenly there was this dichotomy of like, wow, like I'm kind of living the life on one side as a musician, and it doesn't look anything like the life that I'm living working for a record company. And the life working for a record company was a hell of a lot more fun, less stressful,
Right.
and actually kept me in an apartment, and kept my bills paid. And, at a certain point, it kind of became a no-brainer. I guess if the band had, different things were happening for the band, if we had a local, if we had a song being played on local radio, if we were, if the band was growing and we had bigger gigs, if the same indicators were happening for the band that were happening in my career as a record company person, I might have chosen to stay with the band.
Yeah.
But the choice was pretty clear that things weren't really going well with the band, and things were going pretty good, working the job at the record label. So, go work.
Yeah, it was kind of a no-brainer at that point. I can understand that.
Yeah.
Do you see when you so you come into contact with, as you said, it's all relationships for you, and you come into contact with a lot of artists, a lot of people doing their work, mostly passionately, I'm assuming. And do you see something like a theme that runs through artists? Like, theoretically, everybody is passionate about their work, or they're unswerving, or they go through changes, or something like that. Do you see something that keeps repeating over all these years with different artists?
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard one. I've seen, to this day, I see, I'm friends and I know people that represent the entire spectrum of creative people and musician. I know people that are incredibly, incredibly successful, have made a lot of money. Some of them are household names, and I know people that are still struggling to get a leg up and to develop a professional career that pays enough money to support their family and, do what they love and have their bills paid. I don't know what separates the people who are ultimately rewarded and successful from the people that work really hard and struggle and don't get that big break.
But I don't even think that's, I don't know if there's even, I don't even know if it's possible to come up with that. You know what I mean? I think it's more success. And I mean, you tell me, but I think success it's a relative term, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, look, I think that, I think that people, like, look, success you get to define on your own terms, right? Like, and you can keep, changing it and keep moving the bar and go higher and higher as you achieve different things, right? I would say that, the people that I get to work with are all intensely passionate about what they do. It gets back to that other thing that I was saying, which was that you don't choose it chooses you. Whether you are doing your best and struggling to build a career, or you have hit the pinnacle and money is no longer a problem, and you get everything that goes along with that, whether it's fame or notoriety or awards or critical acclaim or whatever. I think that it's just something that chooses people. And I don't, in the same way, I was chosen to be in music. I wasn't chosen to be a musician. And I think that people that are chosen to be musicians all have that other thing in common, which is that you can't stop doing it. It's like oxygen. You really don't get a choice. There's not a single professional musician I know has a choice to stop. Whether they're incredibly successful or they're struggling, I don't know a single professional musician who has a choice to stop and say, you know what, I'm going to go do this for a living, or I'm going to go do that for a living. It just doesn't happen. I mean, after 35 years of being in the business, I've yet to meet anybody that, if they could make the choice, wouldn't make the choice. You know, obviously I was able to make the choice, right? I was able to make the choice. So I chose to, you know, work on the record side of things as opposed to be, you know, keep trying to be a professional musician. For whatever reason, I had the choice. But I think that all the people that I know that do it professionally, they literally do not have the choice. I think that's the single common thing that they all have in common, that if they could make another choice, they would, but they just can't. They just can't for whatever reason. And, you know, that's a beautiful thing. That I mean, look, I don't know about spiritual stuff, but to me, that sounds like some version of divinity to me, is that the universe is speaking to you through this form of expression, through music, and you literally don't have a choice other than to respond to that calling and answer it, right? That has to be spiritual. That has to be divinity on some level, because I don't have any other explanation for what that could be.
Yeah. Yeah, especially in that it's a repetitive thing, you know. It happens from person to person, and it looks the same.
Yeah. I mean, again, no exceptions. As long as I've been doing it, there's no exceptions. You know, people get frustrated. They have good days, they have bad days, they have wins, they have losses. Sometimes they have big wins, sometimes they have big losses. But what they all have in common is they never stop. They just never stop. It's not possible.
I was thinking while you were saying that, I was wondering about that for myself. And I recognize when you were first talking about it, I recognized something. I'm going to have to think about that, because there was this feeling of almost not exactly struggle, but kind of I'm going to have to think about that. You know, not probably on the interview. So, but it's very interesting, because I've been a musician all my life, or singer all my life, and I've played instruments, and I grew up in a musical family. And even though I did have certain times where I thought I might like to go in, you know, as a career, different direction, it never really blossomed out, you know. And I always went back to music, because it was almost like a religion to me, you know. It was something that I had to practice. I had to practice in my daily life, you know. I don't mean practice, but I had to put into motion. And when I do put it into motion, there are results that are very, it's almost like music is a personality and a relationship that I have. Maybe that's where the kind of fight thing that I was picking up on, you know. It's like it's always wanting something from me, you know. And sometimes I can deliver it, and sometimes I can't. Sometimes I don't want to. And it's kind of like, you know, a partner going, well, why aren't you paying attention to me? Or, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's really, I have for a long time felt that music is just basically a religion, or jazz is a religion, because it's something I practice, and it brings me closer to a feeling of God. And what else would religion be, you know?
I just heard a quote, and I can't remember who this is attributed to. I wish I could remember who this is attributed to. It's gonna haunt me now. But there's a quote by a famous musician. I can't remember who it is, but the quote is that, praying is talking to God, meditating is listening, and playing piano allows you to do both at the same time. And, I think that, you could replace piano with, singing or playing an instrument, right? That like, praying is talking to God, meditation is listening, and playing an instrument is doing both at the same time. And I really believe that. I mean, I really do. We just put out a record for Clint Mansell. He scored Rebecca, the Netflix film that's out now.
Yeah.
But Clint is best known perhaps for some of his earlier work, including Pi, and it's the 20th anniversary of Requiem for a Dream, and he did Black Swan. I think he was nominated for an Academy Award on Black Swan. Noah, The Fountain, really, seminal films. Lux Eterna, which is the primary theme, the defining theme of Requiem for a Dream, is probably one of the most iconic pieces of film music ever written. I think that most people, if you're thinking about iconic film themes, iconic, film melodies and themes, Lux Eterna from Requiem for a Dream is probably there with, no joke, with like Star Wars or Close Encounters or, The Magnificent Seven or something. I mean, it really is a truly, truly iconic thing. And there was just an interview with Clint for Film Independent talking about with John Burlingame from Variety about, his career and the 20-year retrospective and Requiem for a Dream, and how did this track come about? How did Lux Eterna come about? It's just this epic piece of music, and it's epic in a lot of ways because it's understated. It's a quartet, right? So it's epic in its overall motion and size, but it's being played by a quartet, and it's just this incredible piece of music. And it touches, I don't know of anybody who hears it who's not touched by it, whether you've seen the film or not, which is another hallmark of, transcendence and divinity. It's like you can hear this thing and you can hear the emotion. It resonates at a frequency that you don't even have to see the film. Listen to this piece of music and it gets you. It gets everyone. And John Burlingame was asking Clint, how did you do it? How did you do it? Tell us the secret. And Clint's like, well, it started off as a hip hop riff because we were really inspired by a lot of, 90s hip hop and a lot of music that was being made on MPC 60s and these certain kind of staccato riffs. And, was really kind of playing with that motif that this had to be very visceral, very street, very cool, very now, all these elements. And, all these years, I'd never heard that before. And you hear this piece of music, and I never in a million years would have guessed that it was the original inspiration for the primary melody and the primary riff of that theme was trying to emulate or inspired by hip hop kind of beats, how they were using string stabs and stuff. And when he said it all clicked for me. I was like, oh my God, that totally makes sense. And then he goes on and he says, but when we went to record it with the Kronos Quartet, who's like, the world's leading quartet, right? And so he's like, just so blessed that, his score before that, he was in an electronic band and he did an electronic score for Pi. And then he's going and doing the score for Requiem for a Dream with the Kronos Quartet. And he says, I got there, I didn't really know what I was doing. I wrote this music and I had to have a orchestrator and arranger help me with it and all that. He said, when the Kronos Quartet started playing it, he was like, oh my God, I'm done for. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. This is it. The house of cards is coming down. Everybody's going to know I'm a failure. I just faked my way through. Right. And then, he doesn't write music, he doesn't formally write. And so one of the orchestrators came to him and said, well, what's it sound like in your head? And so he sang it with the cadence that he needed. He was just like, it goes like this. He's like, okay, we can do that. And then the next take, Kronos played it, and it was just like, it was, like one of those aha moments, like the skies opened, and there was a white light, and like it all clicked. And so, like, where does it come from? Where does it come from? I've heard so many of those stories that you think it comes from someplace as a listener, and then you come to find out that it's come from someplace that you never would have expected. And if that's not divinity, if that's not touching the divine, if that is not being tuned into some celestial radio station that you happen to, tune into for a minute or a second or whatever it is to get that inspiration, right? I don't know what is. I just don't know what is.
Wow, that's so cool. And that reminds me of a few different things, but it's one thing I love about that is that it brings out and focuses on what really is important and important to express, which is what is inside you, coming through you, and the ability of you to kind of step out of the way and let that happen. But that's difficult. It's challenging. That's a super challenging skill. And some people naturally have it. But like that situation, that person didn't think that they even could do that until the orchestrator said, oh yeah, we can do that. And then it happened, and he saw it, and it worked. It's really, that's the kind of stuff I love, and I really love to be a part of helping people to realize that kind of stuff, because that's one thing we're all capable of, and
well, that's why I believe in music education, right? Is because it gives people the opportunity to touch the divine, right? Look, you can be like, look, I guess it's horses for courses, right? But I think that just the basics, giving people music theory, teaching them scales, giving them the foundation, and some people are going to, go and become, first chair violinist, and they're going to be world-class players. And, some people are going to be, front a punk rock band where they know 3 chords, and it's going to be like religion to the people that hear it, right? But in either case, when you don't get to be a first chair violinist, without touching the divine. You've got to check out on some level where it just flows through, whether you're a first chair violinist or you're a guitar player in a punk rock band that's got 3 chords. In both cases, it is divinity. In both cases, it is touching the divine, whether people recognize it or not. And this whole rap I've got to give a moment of respect and a moment of kudos to Genesis Peorage of Psychic TV, who was a phenomenal artist in his own right. Genesis is the one who really gave me that rap. Through my career, I've gotten to work with a lot of artists of a lot of different disciplines and a lot of different perspectives. And Genesis was one of the most pure artists that I'd ever met. Unapologetically just was an artist. And Genesis was the one who gave me that rap on touching the divine. He said, how else do you think it happened? He's like, what do you think is really going on there? He's like, I made a record in the dark wearing sunglasses on acid, and I didn't know what it sounded like until 3 days later. He's like, it's all part of the same universe,
Sorry, I'm just answering somebody who's written something, but I'm listening. Are you there?
Yeah. So anyway, I got that rap from Genesis, but it really resonated with me. So giving God rest his soul, he passed away earlier this year. He was a beautiful human being, just absolutely, an awesome, artist.
Cool. Let's see. I'm going to put you back up here. Yeah. I wanted to tell you, there's a documentary that some friends of mine did the music for Dave Grusin, who wrote a lot of great music for films and TV and such. And he said that when he was given a film to write music, he would look at let's see, he didn't care about the story. He would look at like the picture that was there, like it was summer on the pond, and that's how he would write. So that's just another interesting point, because many people would think he had to know the story to write music for the story,
Well, I think it's all emotion, right? I mean, it's responding viscerally to a certain emotion. It's like music is a time machine, right? Like,
right.
We have a joke. One of my friends who's a very successful music supervisor and film music executive, when I was new on this side of the business, on the film music side of the business, he brought us some really great records early on, and we went to lunch, and I was just talking, so you're a music supervisor. That must be great. You're picking out songs for the movies, and you're working with composers, and like, what is that process? This was before I was doing it myself, and so I just was just eager to learn, what's that process like? You get to work with these directors, and you get to work with these producers, and your credits, you've worked on some like amazing films. And he said, look, I understand it looks really good from the outside, but he said, if you want to know what year a director lost their virginity, you can tell from the temp score, or you can tell from the songs that they temp into a movie, right? And basically what he was saying is that,
what is temp?
Everybody
what is the word temp?
What's that?
Mean? What is the word temp?
It means the music. It means the music that they temp into a movie before the actual score is written, or the music that they, the songs that they put into a movie before they can actually clear. A lot of times music is put into a film, and it's not the music that can be cleared for whatever reason, whether it's a song or its score or whatever. So
just something to go by.
So in the current world of film production, when a film is being edited, generally the editor will start to, just take stuff and go like, what do you think of this? Or the director will say, let's try this song in the scene because I like this song and I think it represents whatever, right? And so by the time a music supervisor, sometimes, there's no one way, but a lot of times, directors will have already done a pass of temping in songs that they like, or a music editor or an editor will be temping in score to kind of just give a feeling to a film of what it feels like. And so really the point there is that music is a time machine. Music there are certain songs, I'm sure, for everybody, that the minute you hear that song, it takes you to a specific time and place, and you can touch it, you can feel it, it's like you can smell it, you're there, right?
Yeah.
And again, to me, that speaks to the power of music, that it has this incredibly strong, the way that our brains react to it, the way that our brains get hardwired to these musical experiences, very powerful, very, very powerful. And like, that's, again, so that's why I really believe in music education, getting people to learn music so that they can express themselves. And it becomes its own language, and it's a language of emotion, right? So why does a director put in a song, tempo song into a film that is 20 years old or 30 years old? Because it resonates with them from a point in their life, and that you get a dopamine rush off of it. When you hear that song, you feel good. You hear that song and you feel good. I think Spotify did a study that, because they have all this listener data, which of course they'll never share with us, but they share bits and pieces of it. And Spotify, analyzed, I don't know how much user data they had, and they said basically people stop listening to new music between 27 and 32 is where people stop. By the time you get to 32, you're already you're going to be listening to the same stuff that you've been listening to up until the point you were 32. Most people stop listening to new music by the time they're 32. Some stop as early as 27, but most people stop. So between 27 and 32, most people stop listening to new music. And the reason why, in my theory, is that because, you know, by the time you're an adult and you're struggling or whatever, you're having, you know, adult experiences, you know, you'll hear a song from your youth and it just puts you back there. It just puts you back at the pool. It just puts you back, you know, wherever you were, that you were carefree and young and cute. And you were just like, wow, this feels good. Right. So, you know, I think, you know, I think that like the whole thing of like sex and drugs and rock and roll, I think music is actually all that. I think music is sex and drugs and rock and roll. I think it's all in the one. I don't know that you have to have the other two after a certain point. Probably a lot of fun, but you don't have to, I don't think.
Okay, pretty cool. What is, just curious, what is, I've heard this in so many different forms, but what is the best day you ever had and what is the worst day that you ever had in the business?
Oh man, that is a really good question. I don't know. Like, you know, the best day and the worst day. I don't know that I've had a really bad day. You know, like honestly, there's frustrating days and there are days that are frustrating and there are days that you struggle and there's days that you get up and you go, man, fuck, this is hard. This is just fucking hard. You know, making deals is hard, you know, making records is hard, keeping people happy is hard, you know, managing expectations is hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all hard. Like the joke is like, if it was easy, anybody could do it, right? Or the other quote I like is, because it is hard, we have jobs. But because it is hard doesn't mean that it's not enjoyable. It can be hard and still be enjoyable. It can be hard and still be fun.
Yeah.
You know, just because it's hard, like climbing a mountain is hard, but it's worth it when you get to the top, right? There's a lot of things that are hard, but are also very gratifying, right? So just because it's hard, I don't know, you know, I'm sure that I've had bad days where I lost a particular deal or I was heavily invested in a particular project that didn't go my way. And I just really super bummed out that I had wished that, you know, I could be a part of that project because I was a fan and I wanted to work with those people and I wasn't going to have that opportunity. So I imagine that I've had days that I would consider to be, you know, bad days, but I mean, like, really, I mean, come on, like, we work in music, we work in entertainment. Nobody's dying on the table. We're not, you know, I always joke to people like, thank God, you know, record labels aren't airlines. You know, it's not even that we would crash all the airplanes. It's that they would never get off the ground, you know, like, you know, if you had to apply the same standards to a record label that you apply to an airline, you know, like it just, you know, just the dynamic of what we do is so radically different. It's just all a ball of chaos, you know, but it's a ball of chaos that we love. And it's a ball of chaos that we've all signed on for. And why is it a ball of chaos? Because it's divine. I don't know how it's supposed to work out. I don't know what's supposed to happen. You know, like I wake up in the morning and these 5 things are supposed to happen. And then by the end of the day, none of them happen. It's a complete disaster. But somehow it all works out. Like I you know, I don't know what to say about that, but you can't say the same for an airplane. If the airplane takes off, it better get to where it's supposed to go and it better land safely, right? You know,
that's a disaster.
Like in music, you know, music is just all chaos, right? It's just all chaos and shenanigans all the time. And I think that you have to have a certain personality to, you know, to kind of, you know, take your turn in the barrel, as it were, and show up tomorrow and do it again. So, you know, the worst day ever, I don't know. You know, I can't, philosophically, I can't have bad days. I can't have a worst day ever about a job. I can't have a worst day ever about a record, right? Like the worst day ever is somebody dies. You know, the worst day ever is there's human tragedy, right?
Yeah.
Worst career day is, it just doesn't even blip on my radar map, my conceptual radar map. That being said, you know, are there days that are better than others? Yeah. Are there highlights? Yeah, you believe it. You know, like going to Abbey Road, yeah, that's a highlight. You know, you check the box off, you know, going to Abbey Road, watching Alexandre Desplat, you know, conduct the London Symphony Orchestra for 2 days. Yeah, that's a pretty good day. I could get used to that, you know. You know, going to Skywalker Ranch, you know, going like to the land of Lucas and Skywalker Ranch to work on a couple projects and be there for scoring sessions. Yeah, that's a pretty good day. I'll take that. That's a lot of fun, you know. You know, working with artists and watching their careers develop, you know, working with an artist from, you know, relative obscurity and then seeing them, you know, get nominated for an Academy Award or get nominated for a Grammy or win an Emmy. Yeah, that's a pretty good day. You know, that's a pretty good day to like go, man, you know, like I worked with these people and, you know, like Catherine, you know, gets made the short list for the best song Academy Award. That's a pretty good day. You get to share in that with somebody, you know, that you contributed in some way to somebody else's joy and somebody else's recognition. That's a good day. They're not all good days, right? But that doesn't mean that they're horrible days or bad days. They might be hard, but hard doesn't equal horrible, you know?
Yeah. That's kind of how my life is right now. Probably a lot of people, you know, it's like there are pretty good days, you know, and in a way I feel guilty because I'm having, you know, a lot of pretty good days. And then some days are really good, you know, because something outstanding happens, you know. But yeah. Are you full on work right now, or are you slowed down also because of COVID?
No, it's amazing. We've probably had our most productive year. We probably put out more records this year.
Wow.
I think this might be the most amount of records we've ever put out in a year. And you know, like, look, you know, I have a hard time saying no to people. Again, I believe that all art is important to the people that made it. You know, I really have a very, very hard time, much to the dismay of my staff and my production staff, who, you know, will just, you know, beg me and say, you know, please, you know, we're overwhelmed, you know, we can't put out all these records. And, you know, it's hard for me to say no, like, and I've got to balance, you know, my desire to want to be of service to people and help them out with my responsibility to my staff to not overwork them, so that they can have quality of life that is enjoyable for them as well. So we've been really busy. We've got, you know, probably 2 of our biggest records of the year coming up. And, you know, big records don't, look, it's nice to have big records. They pay the bills, you know, but, you know, it doesn't diminish my passion and enthusiasm for records that don't pay the bills. You know, some of my favorite records are records that have smaller audiences. You know, this year, we're really blessed to have 2 real big projects coming up. We have Assassin's Creed Valhalla coming up. It's a video game score. 3 incredible musicians. 2 of them are co-composers, Jesper Kidd and Sarah Schachner. And then also there's Einar Selvik has done all these Viking songs, which is just really badass and totally, totally cool. And then have the soundtrack to Cyberpunk 2077 coming up, which is another video game, which I also got to be the music supervisor on the video game. Spent 4 years music supervising it with Eric Craig, who works with me. And Eric and I have pretty much done all of our films together as a team. And so Eric and I music supervised Cyberpunk 2077. And, you know, we spent like 4 years working on the music for this game, 4 years working with artists and musicians and the creative team on the game. And, you know, it was a lot of work, just a lot of work. And we're really happy to get to release the soundtrack album to the game. And it's huge culturally. I mean, you know, like Grand Theft Auto is this really big video game. It's like, was a cultural game changer. And I think that, you know, Cyberpunk might be the same. I think it might be this really, really just dramatically huge, you know, video game experience that a lot of people are excited about. So it's nice to work on projects that are big and that people are excited about. And there are a lot of work, and, you know, have a responsibility to our partners to support those projects as best we can. And, you know, and working with people that we love, that we have long-term relationships with, you know, Rebecca by Clint Mansell. Anytime that we get to work with Clint is, you know, always puts a smile on my face. Clint is an amazing, amazing musician with an incredible pedigree and incredible history, and getting to do Rebecca with Clint was amazing. We've got 2 projects coming up. One we just released for Chris Bowers, who's an amazing, amazing pianist and jazz musician. If you haven't checked him out, you really need to. He did the score. He played all the Don Shirley tracks for Green Book, and, you know, did the score for Green Book as well. But he also performed all the Don Shirley tracks. And we just did Bad Hair for him, which is a horror film at Hulu that Justin Simeon directed. And we're doing Bridgerton with him, which is coming out on Christmas Day on Netflix. And that's going to be amazing. So, you know, we're really privileged. We're just really, really privileged to get to work with so many amazing artists, so many amazing, talented people, both filmmakers and composers and musicians, everybody in their own discipline. You know, if somebody would have told the 17-year-old me that this is what my life was going to be like, I would have said, no way, you know, no way. That's like crazy. Like, there's no way. And, you know, so from being a kid who was consuming all of this culture, consuming film and TV and music, and then later on video games, to now, you know, be a part of the process of bringing this stuff into the world and letting it live and find its own audience, you know, either as a music executive or a music supervisor or as a record label, is just an incredible privilege. You know, I mean, I don't know what else to say. You know, it sounds a bit twee and maybe Pollyanna, but like, you know, blessed, you know, like, you know, like, what am I going to say? Like, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And now I don't quite understand. Do you, for lack of a better word, do you hire your artists, or do the artists hire you?
You're cutting out there. I'm not getting, it's all choppy. I'm not hearing the question.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Pretty good.
Yeah, better.
I'm wondering, and I'm not sure I'm asking this correctly, but do you hire the musicians, or do the musicians hire you?
I think the question was, do I hire the musicians?
The artists. Well, the
Lakeshore,
artists. I mean, do you?
The artists.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's you who hired the artists and get the projects going, or the projects and the artists hire you.
Well, it's neither one. It's neither one. It's a business to business relationship. So it depends. When, you know, at Lakeshore for nearly 20 years as the executive in charge of music, I would be responsible for hiring the composer. You know, like, look, everything in Hollywood is done by a team. You know, everybody consults, everybody works together, grudgingly or not. We all learn to get along. But, you know, at Lakeshore for 20 years working on the film side as the music executive there and music supervisor, as part of the team that would, you know, ultimately work to hire the composer. You know, and then once I hired the composer would then, you know, score the film and, you know, figure out how they were going to hire musicians, where they were going to record. You know, is it Alexandre Desplat at Abbey Road with the London Symphony Orchestra? Is it, you know, somebody doing it in town? Is it a quartet? Is it a full orchestra? Is it a synthesizer? You know, what is it? So we would hire the composer, and then the composer would hire those musicians. When it comes to songs, a lot of the songs are just, they exist. So you license them from the other labels. You know, you reach out to Warner and Sony and Interscope, and you say, our director would really like this song. And, you know, we had a great staff of Clint's people, and we would have a conversation. We would clear those songs for the films. And sometimes if we got lucky, we got to work on original music, and we got to hire the musicians to write original songs. And that was always really kind of the most fun, is having an original song written for a movie. It's still, whenever that opportunity presents itself, it's always the most fun thing, especially when, you know, you can show somebody the scene that the song is going to go in, and you sit with them and you kind of play them references, and then they give you ideas, and then you go back and forth, and we kind of interpret what the director wants to get us started. And then, you know, at a certain point, you know, the director talks to the musician, the artist, to kind of tweak it. And you're part of that whole process to get original songs made is really probably the most gratifying part of it. Well, then, you know, like, once we hire the composer is off doing their own thing. We don't really have a lot of feedback. You know, if a composer is getting notes, they're not getting notes from me. They're getting notes from the producers. They're getting notes from the director. You know, they don't get notes from music supervisors most of the time. But when it comes to making original songs, that fits more in the realm of where a music supervisor can really kind of get their teeth into a project. I was fortunate that at Lakeshore, we redid Fame. We did a remake of Fame in 2009. And, you know, that was like the Olympics, you know, that like was like the Olympics of music
Wow.
production for film, you know, all exclusive. We had a couple covers in there, and we hired teams of songwriters and producers. We had, you know, a friend of mine became the primary music production person, which was great to work with somebody that intimately. We hired, you know, I don't know how many amazing musicians to work on those songs and work on that production music. You know, that's really the most fun part of it. So it depends. It can be none, it can be all. You know, it just really depends on the project.
I think what I was missing before was that the film company hires you to, I guess it's produce the music. Then you decide what's needed.
I'm just getting a lot
it might
of
be, yeah. I'm not sure. It could be the internet, or it could be that I was a little far away. So I think what
it seems to work better when you're closer. I don't know why that is, but it seems to work better when you're close. Maybe there's a gate on the mic or something, and it needs a certain volume to trigger.
Yeah. Well, what I was saying was, I think what I was missing before was that the film actually hires you or your company to produce the music, and then you get it together however it needs to be gotten together.
Yeah, I mean, at Lakeshore, we were part of the company, so we weren't hired. We were actually part of the company. But, you know, the work that we've done for other people, you know, we're hired by the film production company. So that's a correct assessment.
Okay, cool. I understand now. For some reason, I was missing that piece of information. Let's see. Is there anything that you want to tell me that I should know, that I would be interested in, that I would not have any idea of asking you?
Say that again.
Is there anything that you might tell me that you think that I might have no idea of asking you about?
I don't know. That's always a good question. Like, what do I think that people want to know that I haven't been asked? I don't know. You know, it's always such a tough question. You know, when I would do these composer reviews, we have a series of composer interviews on YouTube where we would sit down and do these EPKs with composers, and it would always be a question I've asked them. I'd say, is there anything that I should know that you haven't brought up? They're like, no. I'm like, really? Like, I'm supposed to know everything, and now here I am on the other end of that question. I'm going like, I'm not really sure that. Like, that's funny. Like, now when the shoe's on the other foot, suddenly I don't have an answer for it. You know, the only thing that I would say is that I think that regardless of where you find yourself in the business, and I'm guessing this is an industry or musician focused, you know, thing, you know, interview podcast, is, you know, be a fan, and, you know that I don't know why. I don't think that any of us know why, you know, things click for some people. You know, some people seemingly, you know, stumble into stuff and become incredibly successful, and other people work so hard for so long and don't make any considerable gains. Um, I don't know why that is. I just don't know why that is. I've made my peace with it in my own life. And never say never. Hope is a 4-letter word. Like, we can always believe that, the $1 million check is going to land in our mailbox tomorrow.
Yeah.
I certainly have enough experience and enough friends to know that the calculus. I guess the one thing that I would say is that my understanding of entertainment and my understanding of music is that it's nonlinear. There is no direct path from point A to point B. 2 plus 2 never equals 4. 2 plus 2 equals 0 or equals 20 million, or anything in between 0 and 20 million. Like, the math in the creative industries, the math in the creative side of the business just never seems to be linear to me. It seems that it's you don't really know how things are going to conspire on a day-to-day basis to play out, and the one thing that I know for sure is that if you don't play, you can't win, right? The day you don't show up is the day that things can't happen. So, like, to me, a lot of it is showing up. A lot of it is showing up. And, like, look, I'll just tell you honestly that over the course of my career, the record label should probably have been out of business at least 3 times already. There are 3 times over the last 20 years of Lakeshore Record that, for whatever reason, things got really lean. We weren't landing big records. We weren't landing records that would pay the bills. The industry was shifting. The dynamic of the business was changing. Piracy was introduced. There's a format shift from CDs to iTunes. There's a format shift from iTunes to Spotify. Whatever it is, there's a number of different factors that, over the years, we've probably had at least 2 or 3 times where, I started the new year in January, and by March, like, oof, this is hard, get to May or June. It's like, man, I don't know. This might be the last year. This just might be the last year. We may not make it. And then July and August, and then suddenly something happens. The phone rings, or, somebody remembered you, or somebody has a project and they liked you, or whatever it is, some random thing happens. I can beat my head against the wall for months on end and nothing will happen. I can use all the self-will that I have. I can be as persistent as humanly possible. Get up every day with a checklist and go down that checklist and do everything that is in my power to make things happen, and nothing happens. Absolutely nothing happens. And then I just take a long walk and I just go, okay, that's it. Did best. It's not working out. There's going to be another plan, and I'm just going to have to transition to whatever that is, because this isn't working out. And 3 times that has happened, and 3 times the phone has rang, and it's been an opportunity or a project that changed everything. And I don't know why or how that happens. Again, this is my whole rap on it being a spiritual thing, or it being divinity, or it being whatever. And I think that's, like, look, I'm talking about it in the context of music, because I really believe that playing music puts you in a state of mind where you can touch the divine. But I think in a broader way in life, it's a spiritual thing, like not a religious thing, but a spiritual thing. We have a lot of self-will, and things will not happen. And, I can't account for a lot of the things that happen in the way that they happen, other than to say, I have to believe that for me, I am where I am because there is a lesson in it. And this is where I need to be helpful. This is where I need to be of service. And if I can't be of service, and if I can't be helpful to people, then I will be moved to someplace where I can. And, the universe as yet has not found it necessary to make me full in a mansion in Bel Air. I look forward to that opportunity should the universe avail itself to me. But as yet, it has been horrible. And I do the best that I can. So I think that's really it for me.
That's great. I love that. And you have this beautiful background behind you. So, you've done pretty well. that reminds me of two things.
It's all
First of
copy. I
all,
can't hear you. I think we're losing a connection.
okay. I guess I just have to keep looking straight ahead is what it is. That has two
You know, I opened
interest.
up the chat window in Zoom, so like if I can't hear you, you might just want to type out a question to me. That might work if I can't hear you.
You know, I don't have a chat window.
Oh, you don't have a chat window?
No, I'm not looking at you in Zoom. I'm looking at you in Zoom on YouTube. And so, like I said before, my
okay. Well, maybe write it down and hold it up to the screen.
you know, that's kind of how I started this whole series in March. A little bit like that. What I was going to say was there were two things that brought to mind. One was the action of letting go, which
I wish I could hear you. I'm just not getting anything.
Wow. How about now?
It's a little bit better now. It kind of comes and goes. I get the beginning of it and then it just chops out and then it goes silent.
Sorry about that.
Technology.
Yeah. I'm going to keep trying to talk. One thing was that it's talking about letting go. And the other thing, no, huh?
You want me to talk about that? Letting go, the process of letting go? Is that the
yeah.
question?
Sure.
Is that, you put it up, that's the question, the process of letting go? Yeah. So
sure.
I'm not really good at it. You know, I think, you know, the Buddhists have a saying, and maybe a lot of other practices or other, you know, spiritual practices have this kind of saying, which is, you know, trust the teachings, not the teacher. You know, probably if we look at, you know, the great, you know, a lot of the really transformative spiritual works that have been written, you know, a lot of times the authors of those spiritual works are deeply flawed people because we're all human beings. So, you know, I certainly don't purport to, you know, practice, you know, the things that I've come to learn. I don't practice them as well as I would hope to, maybe. That's why we call it practice, right? That's why it's a spiritual practice, is because we practice it. We're not necessarily gonna master it. It's an ongoing practice. And so, you know, letting go is hard. You know, letting go is hard when you have expectations, right? So, you know, disappointment, you know, what's the phrase is that expectations are the down payment on disappointment. And, you know, that's where, oh, good. You found the chat. That's great. I'll open up the chat window. So, you know, for me, you know, letting go is always tough, and it's tough. I think letting go is tough for anybody creatively or anybody who's working in the arts, or maybe just people in life in general. Letting go is hard because letting go is the process of it's hard to let go because you're invested, because you're passionate, right? If you weren't passionate and you weren't invested, then letting go would be easy, right? So, you know, the Buddhists have that saying that attachment is the cause of all suffering, right? Attachment is the root of all suffering, because, you know, the more attached you are to something, the least likely, you know, the harder it is for you to let something go, probably the more likely it is to do you harm. And, you know, like one of the things I kind of visualize about, you know, the power of letting go of things is that, you know, you wouldn't go swimming, you know, holding on to a cinder block. You know, people don't go swimming with cinder blocks for a reason, you know, because you'll sink, you know, and you'll drown. And, you know, the same goes, I think, true for a lot of life, which is, you know, let go of the cinder block if you're going to go swimming. And, you know, ultimately, I think that for musicians and creative people, it's hard to let go of that because we're passionate people. You know, I'm a very loud person. I'm a very passionate person. People that know me in the office at Lakeshore, which was it wasn't an open office, but it was airy. I'll put it that way. The joke inside the building was, and they put up with me for 14 years in that building, but the joke was that, there was never a moment during the day where anybody was ambiguous about where I was emotionally or geographically. I just tend to be a very loud and impassioned person, and that passion drives why I do what I do and how I do it and the way that I do it, because I'm very passionate about the projects and the people, and the projects that we get to work on, and I care a lot. And that caring, when you care about something and things go sideways, it's hard to let go of that defeat or that disappointment or whatever it was, whatever expectation it is that you had for a project or a relationship or whatever it is, letting go of that is really hard. And it's hard because we had expectations, and it's hard because we're passionate. And, that really is probably the hardest part of my spiritual practice, is to be more graceful in the letting go process, and sometimes you just, I have to reframe and say, if this was meant to be, it would happen, I ask myself the same questions. Did I do everything that I could do? Did I do it to the best of my ability? Could I have done more? And, could I have done more is always a tricky question, because could I have more almost should always be countered with, could I have done less? Right. So, there's an unrealistic expectation, I think, in asking ourselves, could I have done more? Because, truthfully, there's probably very rare circumstances where if you beat yourself up long enough, you probably could always find something that you could have done more. But you didn't at the time, because you were working with the best information that you had. You were working with the best information you had at the time, and you did the best that you could. And ultimately, you have to resign yourself to the fact that this wasn't the right thing for you at this time. And then you enter into acceptance, right? So letting go ultimately leads to acceptance. And you have to accept that whatever has happened for a reason that I can't calculate. In the same way I can't calculate who's successful and who struggles. It's just not for me to say. So then you have to enter into acceptance. And I will say this, though. I will say there is a very, very interesting thing I've learned over the years. And maybe this is a prospect of maturity, or maybe it's just experience. I don't know. But I can tell you there has been a lot of times when I have lost a project or I have lost an opportunity that was just absolutely heartbreaking. And I thought, oh man, this was the one. If this isn't it, that's it, I'm done. There'll never be another one like this. There'll never be anything this cool ever again. There'll never be anything that will bring this much gratification as if I had gotten this project, or if this thing was successful, or whatever it is. I can tell you that is a lie. Outright, from experience, that is a lie. I can't tell you how many times I've lost a project that I desperately wanted, where something went sideways, and it turned out that was the best thing. There were times when I've dramatically overbid on a project. I've dramatically, would have gotten myself into so much trouble had a deal that didn't work out actually had worked out with the offer that I had made on it. I might have been out of business, because I believed too much, and I was too passionate. And as a result of that, I overinvested. And when I didn't get the project that I overinvested in, I thought it was the end of the world. I couldn't have done anything more. I put the last dollar on it. Like, I bet the company on it, and it didn't happen. And all I can tell you is thank God. Thank God it didn't happen, because I bet the company on it. And had it gone through, might have lost the company. That might have been the end of it all, through my own self-will. So I've learned that, as heartbreaking as it is to lose a project at any given point in time, that I have to accept that it wasn't meant to be. And it's hard. It's hard. As I'm sitting here modestly calm, I can tell you that there are days that I get up and I stomp around the room and wave my hands in the air and go, like, how could this happen? How could this happen? This is not the way this is supposed to go. We were supposed to do this. This was supposed to be a success. This is the one. And, so it's hard. It's just, it's hard.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Oh, good. Well, that's really interesting. There's a lot to the idea of letting go, isn't there?
Yeah, it's hard. But, there's a lot, like, look, again, the idea of like, we don't go swimming with cinder blocks, right? And people will say, well, I'm not holding on to a cinder block. I'm holding on to a balloon. It's like, well, have you jumped into a lake to test that theory?
Right. Yeah. The other thing that I was thinking before was that.
Oh, you're choppy again. I'm sorry.
Okay. Hold on. I'm going to chat. Let's see. Chat. Okay.
I love having a workaround. Okay.
Let's see. The other thing I was thinking about is the idea that outflow equals inflow. And sometimes just doing what you feel is what you're supposed to do is good enough, and to have faith at that point that if you do the action, let go, and give it space, it will return as it should. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So it says the other thing I was thinking about is the idea that outflow equals inflow, and sometimes just doing what you feel you're supposed to do is good enough, and have faith that at that point, that if you do the action, let go and give it space, it will return to you as it should. Yeah, I think so. I mean, like, I don't think it's a cash and prizes kind of thing. I don't know that there's any kind of Gnostic wisdom or spiritual trickery I can do to get the universe to give me what I want. I don't think it works that way. I don't know if I let go of something, that it's necessarily going to come back to me or anything of that nature. I do know if I let go, I make space for whatever is supposed to happen. And the most important thing is that I make space to be open to the next opportunity. And, that's kind of how my career has taken form. I didn't expect that I would end up at a film production company. I didn't expect to be on the Paramount lot for 4.5 years. I didn't expect to be a music supervisor. I didn't expect to go to Abbey Road. I didn't expect a lot of things that have happened. I didn't expect to be on a movie set at 8 o'clock in the morning, firing machine guns and blowing up buildings, but it was a hell of a lot of fun. So I think that, the thing that I try to hold on to is letting go, right? So there's your oxymoron. There's your paradox for you. The thing I try to hold on to is letting go. And in the process, it creates space for whatever is supposed to happen. And I don't get to make the rules. I don't know what's supposed to happen. I would say that probably the greatest limitation in my life is not allowing enough space for things to happen. I think that, probably, the hardest thing to do is to get out of the way and let things happen, because every piece of evidence that I have in my life shows me that when I get out of the way, better things happen than I could have planned for myself. And yet, with all of that evidence, decades of experience of knowing that when I get out of the way, better things happen for me than if I had planned it for myself. And all I have to do is be of service. All I have to do is be helpful and get out of the way. And if I can be helpful and get out of the way, more gratifying experiences happen for me than if I'd tried to will it myself. And I'm not saying it's cash and prizes. I'm not saying that suddenly if I practice this perfectly, that I'm going to end up with, you know, the mansion, or I'm going to end up with whatever it is that I think is going to fix me. Because you can't, and it doesn't. And, you know, I've been very, very fortunate, you know, not everybody gets access to the kind of lives that we get to live in Los Angeles. Not everybody gets access to the kind of people and experiences that we get to have in Los Angeles. And I can tell you that cash and prizes don't make people happy. You know, I've heard the joke that it's like, if you think that money doesn't make you happy, try doing it, you know, with or without money. And I can guarantee you'll be happier with money. I don't know that's true. Actually, honestly, it's a coy thing to say. But, you know, having been around enough people with enough money and people who are truly extraordinarily wealthy, and some of them are happy and some of them are not, you know, knowing people or being around people who have been extraordinarily, truly extraordinarily wealthy, extraordinarily famous, who have chosen to take their own lives because it was, you know, less bearable than to live another day. Whether they did that through, you know, addiction and drugs and alcohol, which is the slow route, or they did it with a gun, or they did it through some other means. We've lost so many musicians. So many musicians are so susceptible to this spiritual malady that causes people to take their own life. You know, and some recently, some intentionally, some non-intentionally. You know, the suicides are incredibly painful. Chris Cornell, Chester Bennington from Lincoln Park. You know, these are incredibly talented people, you know, and then others through, you know, maybe it's drug overdose. Maybe people went a little too far, couldn't reel back, you know, Tom Petty on prescription medication, you know, Prince and Tom Petty both died the same way. They were on, you know, prescription painkillers, and that's a slippery slope, right? And, you know, I don't know that, you know, either one of them, it was their desire to check out, but something was happening where, you know, taking more than they should have was more preferable than going without it, right? So, you know, like I don't get to say what makes sense or why we get what we get or what we should get. I do know that my experiences are better and my life is more fulfilling when I let go and allow myself to be of service and be open to what's next. And it's not about cash and prizes. I can, you know, there are times in my life when I was maybe the happiest I've ever been, where I didn't have a lot in that particular moment, or I was about to lose everything. And in the moment where I was about to lose everything and I had to, you know, really reckon with the fact that, you know, this could be as good as it got, you know, this is it. Everything's got to go, you know, everything's got to be restructured. This is it. This was the run, you know, and still sometimes in those moments are the happiest I've ever been. Because in some of those moments when I wasn't struggling against what was happening, I was actually able to be of service to people and be helpful. And in being helpful to other people, you know, I think that's the other thing that you can do. I think the only other thing that you can do, maybe other than play music, that allows you to touch the divine is to be helpful to other people. Because there's nothing gets you closer to any kind of spiritual realm than getting out of yourself and helping somebody else. So to the degree that you can be helpful to other people is to the degree that you can touch the divine. And if you ever feel really, 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 really bad, things are so horrible that you can't stand it anymore, I guarantee you that if you just walk outside your door, you pick up your phone and say, how can I help you today? Within an hour helping somebody else, you will have forgotten about what got you there in the first place. Suddenly, whatever problem it is that you're having is going to evaporate, and it's going to trigger dopamine because you've actually helped somebody else instead of wallowing in your own self-pity. And, you know, that's a really powerful thing. And I believe that, you know, to me, music is part of this whole spiritual thing, in that what music does on some level is it communicates to people at a raw level. And, by helping people it's one of the reasons I have a hard time saying no to projects when people bring them to me, is because I don't know that release of that record, no matter how small or maybe seemingly insignificant, isn't ultimately what somebody needs to hear on a given day to keep them going. I don't know that it's not the thing that resonates with somebody in a meaningful way that is life altering. I may never know that, right? But that doesn't mean that it's not happening. And so that's why it's hard for me to have a difficult time at saying no to those projects, because I don't know and I can't know. But again, I have to balance that against the well-being of my staff. I just don't get to be a maniac and do whatever I want. I have to answer to my partners in the business and my employer and my staff, and make sure that everybody, I also have to be of service to my staff by not creating an overbearing amount of work that they can't enjoy their lives, right? We can't be martyrs about it. We can't do it into oblivion. There has to be balance. And that's really the trick, right? Is the balance of holding on and letting go. That is I've hired a friend to write a song for a movie. I think it was Jack Goes Boating, maybe. I think it was Jack Goes Boating. It was a Philip Seymour Hoffman film, if I'm not mistaken. And I hired a friend of mine to write a song for the soundtrack album, an inspired by song for the soundtrack album. And he came up with this great line. He came up with this really great line, which became the title of the song that I just love. And the line in the song says, if you can hold on, you can let go, right? If you can hold on, you can let go, right? And isn't that the hard part? Isn't that just the hard part?
Yes. Yes, it is. Can you hear me now? No.
Oh, I see a thumbs up.
No. You can't hear me. It's terrible.
But we have a workaround. You can hear me okay, but I can't hear you. So that's kind of funny that the internet, and you're getting video okay. So that's interesting too.
Well, I'm going to say goodbye.
I'm watching the chat box. Okay.
It's
fantastic. Well, this has really been fun. Thank you so much. It was a great conversation.
Thank you.
Wow.
So much.
It was a quick 2 hours.
And
thank you.
I'd love to.
I hope somebody got something useful out of this.
I'd love to talk again sometime in real time. You're a joy. Catherine
Thank you.
Was correct.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Cool. Okay. Well, fantastic. I guess I'll hit leave on the chat box and or leave on the thing here and let us both get on with our day. Thank you so much. This has really been a wonderful. Last thought. This has been a wonderful way to spend the day before the election. So
thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Brian. Oh my goodness. So I think that everybody here can hear me. I'm still live, and it's been a very weird technical afternoon here. So I hope I don't have to do it this way tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm having a really wonderful pianist from France named Franck Amsalem. And Wednesday I'm having another fabulous piano player who used to live in Los Angeles, who I knew, but he's lived on the East Coast for a long time, very well known in jazz, named Bill Mays. And so I'm really sorry about the technical difficulties that I was going through with Brian, and sorry we couldn't be on Facebook and have all of your feedback. But I will be sharing it on Facebook. I'm sure I'll be able to. So have a great day, you guys. What else can I tell you? That's about it right now. Yeah, this week I'm going to start working on my next single coming out, like the promotion part of it, because it's all done. So start looking for that too. Okay, everybody. Let's see if I can actually get out of here. I think I can.